And while it has been an absolutely terrible year, a year of uncertainty, of hardship, of terrible loss here in Australia, but frankly all around the world, and in so many parts of the world, that loss still runs on. It accelerates, it devastates. But while all of that is true, in Australia, we have seen one of the most remarkable performances of Australians in our Australian economy that we have seen. In less than 12 months from when the recession began, caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, there are now more jobs in the Australian economy than there were before the pandemic. That is something that is truly remarkable and is a great credit to every Australian who hung in there, every Australian business who kept people in jobs, everyone who played a role in ensuring that we did everything we possibly could to see that Australia continues to come through this COVID-19 and pandemic and recession in the best way we possibly can. More jobs now than when the recession began. For us as a government, together with the Treasurer and our entire team, it's always been ultimately about jobs for us when we come and form governments. We want to see more Australians in work because we know when an Australian has a job, it's good for their well-being, it's good for their hope, they can plan for their future, they're in control when they're in a job. And that's why we want to see so many Australians in jobs. And indeed, before the pandemic, 1.5 million jobs had been created since we first came to government. And those jobs are now restored. They're restored. There is still a long way to go. Unemployment has fallen to 5.8%. 876,400 jobs have been recreated in our economy since the start of that recession. 88,700 in net terms in February have been created, all of them full-time. 84% of the jobs in this February figures for women. But we aren't there yet. There are more hours still needed. There is still a lot more to do, particularly for young people, and even though the youth unemployment rate has pleasingly fallen, there is still a distance to travel. The pacing of our supports into the economy are proved again to have been wise. We brought it in when it was most needed, and we didn't hold back. We kept it in as the crisis went through its most virulent period. But as we got to the other side, as it began to emerge, as companies were getting back in their feet towards the end of September, we started to gear down those supports, and the jobs increased. We geared down the supports again at the end of December, and the jobs increased. And so as we go into this next phase, we go in with a strong run-up. We go in with a very strong jobs run-up into the next phase of Australia's comeback and Australia's recovery. Our plan is working, Treasurer. We need to stick to the plan. Treasurer.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The strength and resilience of the Australian economy is on display again today. An unemployment rate at 5.8%. 88,700 new jobs. And a participation rate which remains around a record high. What is particularly pleasing in these numbers is that of that 88,700 jobs, all of them were full-time. More than 80% went to women and more than 40% went to young people. New South Wales and its economy has led the charge. 42,000 jobs being created in New South Wales over the month and their unemployment rate falling to 5.6%, the equal lowest of any state in the country. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. But months from here will continue to be challenging because we are still in the midst of a global pandemic and the greatest economic shock since the Great Depression. There are sectors, there are regions across the country who continue to do it tough. But these numbers are encouraging and these numbers give Australians confidence about their economic future.
How do these numbers change the strategy around fiscal repair and the timing around that fiscal repair? And indeed, how do rapid recovering job numbers also provide an argument for greater liberalisation in the labour market?
Well, first of all, we want to keep creating jobs. And right now we've been seeking to do that in the Parliament. And there are those in this Parliament, led by the Labor Party, who want to stop us from creating more jobs by frustrating our plan. But we'll keep creating the jobs despite the opposition, despite the blockages that are put in the way, whether it's in the Senate or elsewhere. We'll keep pressing forward, as we have done over this last year, as we in fact have always done as a government, to press ahead and see the jobs created. And we'll deal with the challenges as they present. But those changes are important. But there are those in these places who don't want to create jobs as passionately as we do in the government. On relation to the fiscal issues, the Treasurer will comment, but we need to be cautious, even with these numbers. Of course, they're very pleasing. They're incredibly encouraging. They say to Australians, well done on the hard work. You're getting the job done by getting Australians into jobs. That's what Australians are achieving. And we need to see that continue. Budget will be in May. We'll be addressing those issues in May. We have many, many challenges that go beyond the pandemic, and I've outlined those on other occasions, but the Treasurer may wish to add further to that.
Well, thanks, Prime Minister. As you know, we laid out a new fiscal strategy ahead of last year's budget, and had two phases to that strategy. And the second phase referred to the fact that the unemployment rate needs to be comfortably below 6%. 5.8% is not comfortably below 6%. But the other point I'd make is that the unemployment rate in February of last year was 5.1%. And so that was where it was pre-pandemic. And we know that JobKeeper is coming off at the end of March, and it will be bumpy, it will be challenging, and the economy will continue to go through the transition. But just as JobKeeper ends, the Morrison government's economic supports continue, and that is extremely important, because it's like the $1.2 billion tourism and aviation package that we announced the other day, as well as the hiring credit, the infrastructure supports, the tax cuts. There's a whole host of government economic support measures that are going to continue to create jobs.
What will removing JobKeeper do to these numbers? And is it the right time to do it? Would you consider extending it?
JobKeeper must come to an end. It's done its job. The job is now taken up of the many other measures that the government has put in place. The Treasurer has just referred to them. The instant expensing issues, which is driving increased investment. The home builder program, which is seeing jobs in the residential building sector now extended out over the next 2 years. The tax cuts that are putting money in the pockets of Australians. The $2,000, the most recent of those payments, getting to those through the welfare system in just the last couple of weeks. The continued rollout of our infrastructure program. All of these things continue to drive the economy forward, just as so many of them were driving the economy forward before we came into this pandemic. As I said, at each stage of our gear change on JobKeeper, we have seen the economy continue to move forward. Now, we're going into that final phase when it comes to JobKeeper, and that's why I'm pleased we're going into it with a strong run-up. Kieran, I think you were...
The survey suggests that there was a fifth of the JobKeeper money was going to companies with rising profits at the end of last year, the second half. Would you like to see some of those companies, or all of those companies with the rising profits, pay a bit of it back?
I've always said that that's a matter for those companies, and many have, and I commend them for doing so. But let's not forget what JobKeeper was doing. I mean, I would rather have profitable companies than non-profitable companies. A profitable company is putting people in work. A profitable company is putting investment into the economy. Those resources find their way into the economy. That's what JobKeeper was doing. It is the single largest economic policy that any government in our history has ever put into the system. And it has saved Australian jobs. It has saved the Australian economy. And I'm absolutely certain that JobKeeper has saved lives in this country. And so it has been a tremendously successful program. But even tremendously successful programs, must gear into the next phase, and that's where we're heading now. Chris.
But Prime Minister and Treasurer, is it your expectation or your advice that unemployment will rise after JobKeeper is withdrawn?
I can refer you to the RBA board minutes for their monetary policy meeting in March, which only came out a couple of days ago. And they said the end of the JobKeeper program was seen as unlikely to result in a sustained increase in the unemployment rate. And Chris, I point you to both the MyEFO forecasts about unemployment, which came down even after JobKeeper ended, and the more recent forecast that came from the RBA, who were predicting by year's end that we would have a 6% unemployment rate, bearing in mind that before today it was at 6.4, though it was revised down to 6.3. So it's the trajectory that we've been focused on. And as you know, Treasury advised the government last year when they did a review of the JobKeeper program, and they said that it had some particular characteristics in the program that as the economy strengthened, would lead, if the JobKeeper program was kept in place, would lead to adverse outcomes, particularly hampering mobility of labour across the economy.
That's a very important point the Treasurer's making.
These programs, if they go beyond what has been their effective period, can actually start to hold the economy back. It can create problems in the mobility of the labour force. You know, we've got tens of thousands of jobs in the latest job vacancy data that is coming through. We're seeing job vacancies continue to rise. As the Deputy Prime Minister will tell you, if you give him half a second, more than 50,000 jobs in regional Australia are out there. There are jobs out there that are being created every day, and we're going to keep creating those jobs. And that is what people can look forward to going forward, that in the position where they may be in a business, if they don't find themselves in the same job at the conclusion of JobKeeper, then this economy is creating jobs for them to move into. David.
The Senate won't pass all your IR reform, or much, most of it being blocked in the Senate. How important is that IR bill? Is it so important that you need to take it back to Parliament and fight for it again? And is it so important that you would take it to the next election?
Well, look, it's still being dealt with in the Senate now, so I think we'll just wait to see the outcome of that process. I've always gone into this process on these changes on the basis that I thought they could play an important role in assisting the recovery in Australia. And I believe they would. And I do believe we need them now. But there are many in the Senate, and the Labor Party in particular, who don't share my passion for creating jobs, and the Treasurers. And so they are working against the government as we are seeking to create jobs. But I'm a practical person too. And that means that if this Senate is saying they don't want to support those measures, then we'll have to consider that in terms of how we go forward, because I'll send them other things to approve. I'll send them other job-making initiatives that they can support. If they don't want to support these job-making initiatives, then that's on them. If they don't want to create jobs as much as the government does, then they need to answer for that.
Prime Minister, as Christian Porter as Industrial Relations Minister, has he done enough to explain to the crossbench why these IR changes are important?
I mean, Christian Porter was working on these matters in countless hours of consultations with employers and unions. You know, as I said back at the Press Club last year, we'll give this a go. We'll bring everybody together. We'll get them around the table. We'll seek to come up with a sensible package of changes in this area, and that's what we did in good faith. I think it demonstrates that still in this country, even when you do that, even when you engage in good faith, the obstructionism that we're seeing in the Senate and from the Labor Party seeks to overcome that good faith. And I think that reflects badly on those who haven't sought to support that process. We've engaged in this in good faith. We've put forward sensible, modest measures that we think can make a real difference. Now, the crossbench and the Senate and others, if they want to reject that, and the Labor Party in particular, well, that's a matter for them. But it won't deter us from seeking to create more jobs. This government has a strong record of job creation, and we achieve it because we work in partnership with businesses, with employees, right across the country, because they are the heroes of these job numbers. It's people who have gone out to get those jobs, and it's the Australians and businesses who have created those jobs that has produced this this incredibly encouraging result for Australia at this difficult time. Claire.
So the government is introducing legislation today to protect the Kate Jenkins review from the Archives Act and the FOI Act. Are you confident that that will be enough for staff to feel comfortable to come forward to that review? And on one of the other reviews that is currently underway, the internal departmental one into who knew what with regards to the allegations Brittany Higgins has made, when can we expect that to be completed and made public?
Well, I addressed the second question in the House yesterday, and I have nothing further to add to what I said in the House yesterday on that. On the other matter, then I certainly hope it does. That's what we've agreed as an opposition and as a government. We agree that that is a measure that should hopefully provide that comfort and provide that security for people to do that. That's what's agreed between the parties, and we both have the same objective here, and I hope that we'll be able to deal with that fairly expeditiously today and give people that confidence.
Prime Minister, last night a male staffer lost his job over a vile slur he made against a woman, yet the Defence Minister is still in your cabinet for a similarly vile slur she made against Brittany Higgins, the alleged rape survivor. How do you choose what language is a fireable offence and what is not?
Well, the particularly vile language that was expressed by that staffer, not on one occasion, is my understanding. This only very recently came to our attention, and we dealt with this over the last couple of days, and as I think you expect us to. Greg.
Said yesterday that while the voice to government legislation should be drafted, he says that that should be set aside and it should not be passed through the Parliament until constitutional recognition is achieved. In other words, the constitutionally enshrined voice. Are you willing to consider going to a referendum to enshrine a voice into the Constitution, or do you rule that out?
We already have. I mean, it's never been the government's policy to have that process enshrined in the Constitution. That's never been the government's policy. I think that's pretty clear. It's not the government's policy.
Do you still think it's a third chamber to Parliament, if that effectively?
It's not the government's policy, Greg. It has never been the government's policy, and there is no change to the government's policy. What we are proceeding with is the co-design process that we set up that is seeking the best possible way to have that voice to government. And I've had numerous meetings myself on this matter, and the Minister for Indigenous Australians is progressing that. On the other issue of constitutional recognition more broadly, then there is still no clear consensus proposal at this stage, which would suggest mainstream support in the Indigenous community or elsewhere. And so we're focused on pursuing the co-design process on the voice to government, and in addition to that, we're getting on with the very important job of closing the gap to make a real practical difference for Indigenous Australians living across this country, to ensure we get more Indigenous children in school, to ensure that we deal with the very serious issues of health impacts on Indigenous Australians right across the country, to get more Indigenous Australians in jobs, and importantly to ensure that Indigenous Australians, and particularly women Indigenous Australians, can be safe in their communities. That's the change I particularly want to see, that is going to make a big difference in the lives of Indigenous Australians across this country. Michelle?
Minister.
Michelle.
Treasurer, we've heard about the 50,000 plus regional vacancies for a long time, and it's been repeated again today. What practically can you do about this? Your scheme to relocate people has not been successful. Do you need to look at new visa arrangements for people already here, or what other initiatives have you in mind to attack this?
Well, there are definitely labour force issues and workforce issues around the country. The fact that the job seeker payment is tapering down and that we have moved to a $50 a fortnight permanent increase, it was higher as an elevated level, Michelle, obviously during the pandemic. Now we've also put in increased mutual obligations, and I think the combination of that, together with the end of JobKeeper, will see more labour mobility across the economy. With respect to visas, and the Prime Minister referenced this in the context of his AFR business speech recently, we're going to be looking to, obviously at the first opportunity, bring the skills into the country that we can, and there's a great opportunity for Australia to do that.
There are people already here who could have visa arrangements changed, though.
And they're the sort of things that we can look at. And we're looking at that with a pretty open book, Michelle. And it's important that we do, because I think one thing that has been demonstrated during the pandemic, I've been working on this issue for a very long time, and we've tried any number of things to try and deal with those regional skill shortages and labour force shortages across the country. And it breaks my heart that fruit is getting ploughed back into the ground now. It breaks my heart, and I can only imagine what it means for those producers in those communities. We have seen that there are jobs, even when high rates of unemployment were in place during the pandemic, that Australians have not gone and done those jobs. And that is a challenge which is holding the rest of the economy back. And so it's not only impacting on those producers directly, but it's impacting on the broader working of the economy and is holding back job creation for Australians in so many other parts of the economy. So that is an important discussion that we're going to have. Filling those jobs to support regional communities, which means that the services in those rural communities become more entrenched and sustainable in those communities. You get people in jobs in regional towns, then you keep your schools, you keep your health staff, you keep your nurses. And this is a big, big challenge that we have, and that the Deputy Prime Minister and I and the Treasurer and the Immigration Minister are very focused on.
So the vaccine rollout is seeing significant challenges. Are you frustrated by them, and will it improve?
We're going to hit 250,000, jab 250,000 Australians this week. In fact, I suspect that'll occur in about the next 24 hours. Last week I was telling you that we'd reached 100,000. And the vaccination program continues to accelerate. We said, when I stood here in this very courtyard with the Health Minister and other health advisors at the time, whether it be Professor Skerritt or Professor Murphy or Professor Kelly, we said we hoped to start the vaccination program in mid to late February. Well, we did. We said we hoped that we would be able to get to about 80,000 vaccinations a week in the early phases, and we have. We said that we would hope to be getting, by the end of March, to the position where we'd be getting major rolls off the line of the CSL vaccines out of Melbourne, and we will. We said we would be doing it through various phases, and that process is already underway, and that we'd be enlisting thousands of doctors around the country in that effort, and we have. We will continue to communicate as clearly as we can with Australians. I'm pleased that so many Australians want to be part of this vaccination program. The surge in interest yesterday was extraordinary, and that just says to me that Australians understand how important this vaccination program is. We will continue to roll out, but the thing I always stress when it comes to the vaccination program is this: were it not for the fact that our government took the strategic decision last August to not rely on international supply of vaccines, then Australia would not have a vaccination program now. It is because of the foresight of the decision that the government took to do that and to put in place the plan, and it's a big project. It's a tough project. It's on a national scale, unprecedented. And we continue to step forward every single day. I appreciate the patience of Australians as we do that, but I also appreciate their enthusiasm and I appreciate their support. And today they can hear this news about how Australia is coming back from the COVID-19 pandemic. These jobs numbers are a real shot in the arm, and that will only boost us as we go into the next phase, as we get to the end of this month. And Australia will continue to lead the world out of the COVID-19 pandemic and the recession it created. Thank you all very much.